Hi, I'm a cowboy in the wild west of algebra, and I'm looking for one man, the quadratic equation. He's been wanted for years now, and I've been on the search. He's been killing the grades of algebra students everywhere for years now, and he's the most wanted person in all of algebra. And fortunately for me, I have a secret weapon, b squared divided by 2. Let's learn how to complete the square. But what is completing the square even for? Great question. Completing the square is a method we can use similar to the quadratic equation that helps us find the zeros of any parabolic function. So, for example, if we wanted to find the zeros of this parabola at there and there, we could easily do that by completing the square. We could also do this by using the quadratic formula, but everybody hates this. It's super long and hard to memorize, so we're not going to use that. So first of all, when should I complete the square? Great question. If we have a function of the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, that's a good start. But it's not the only thing we need to look out for. The other thing we need to look out for is if this equation is not easily factorable. An equation such as x squared plus 6x plus 9 equals 0 is very easily factorable. This is just x plus 3 and x plus 3 equals 0. We don't need to complete the square to solve this question. We're already in good form. But an equation such as 2x squared plus 13x plus 4 equals 0 is unfactorable. We do not have two factors that will eventually add up to be b and multiply to be c. Those are the two things you're going to want to look out for when you want to complete the square. So let's try and do it with this example. Our first step in completing the square is isolating for the x variable. So what we're going to do is we're going to simplify this equation down. First, I'm going to divide both sides by 2, so our equation We're going to divide both sides by 2, so our equation turns into x squared plus 13 halves x plus 4 equals, plus 2 equals 0. I got to divide by 2. And now in order to isolate for the x variable, we just have to get rid of the one thing that doesn't have an x attached to it. So we just subtract 2. This makes our new equation x squared plus 13 halves x equal negative 2. This is the equation we're going to work with in order to complete the square. But you may be wondering, what's next? What do we need to do to complete the square? Great question. What we're going to do is we're going to take this, b divided by 2 squared, and add it to both sides. But what is b divided by 2 squared? Great question. B divided by 2 squared is this number, your b value, divided by 2 squared. What's the significance? Well, if we were to plug in 13 halves, divided by 2, and square it, it'll give us the last factor we need in order to make a perfect square factor. So with the example I was using earlier, x squared plus 6x plus 9 equals 0, these two factors allow us to change this into x plus 3 squared equals 0. When we add this to both sides, we will end up getting a square factor like this, and this is super easy to solve. So let's do that with 13 halves. What we're going to do is we're going to take 13 halves, and we're going to divide it by 2, and we're going to square it. It may look a little intimidating at first. Dividing a fraction by 2 looks a little weird, but 13 halves divided by 2 is the same thing as 13 divided by 2 times 1 half. When you multiply fractions, all you have to do is multiply 13 times 1, your numerators, and multiply 2 times 2, your denominators, and that'll give you your new fraction. So in this case, 13 times 1 is just 13, and 2 times 2 is just 4. Now we need to square this number and add it to both sides of this equation. When squaring a fraction, all you have to do is square the top and square the bottom, and you'll get your new squared fraction. So in this case, 13 squared equals 169, and 4 squared equals 16. So this number right here, 169 divided by 16, is the value we need to add to both sides of this equation in order to complete the square and turn it into a square factor. Let's do that to our equation. I'm going to rewrite the equation up here just so we have a little bit more room. Let's add our 169 divided by 16 to the left side. And remember, our equation needs to stay balanced. So in order to add 169 divided by 16 to this side, we got to do the same to the other side. 169 divided by 16. I'm going to simplify this equation down just a little bit. The left side will stay the same. It'll stay as x squared plus 13 halves x plus 169 divided by 16. And that's going to equal 169 divided by 16 minus 2. To figure out what 169 divided by 16 minus 2 is, we just have to multiply 2 times 16 and subtract that from 169. 16 times 2 is 32. 169 minus 32 is equal to 137 divided by 16. Let me make this a little bit more clear. That doesn't look very good. 169. Perfect. So we're almost there. We're getting pretty close. What we're going to do now is factor this and make it a square factor, such as x plus 3 squared was the same as x squared plus 6x plus 9. And funnily enough, the factor we need to turn this into a square factor, well, we already found it just a second ago. Because we know 13/4 squared is equal to 169 divided by 16. So we can just insert 13/4 equals 137 over 16. Let's simplify this even more. Since x plus 13 divided by 4 is being multiplied by, well, itself, we can change this to x plus 13 divided by 4 squared equals 137 divided by 16. And the final thing I'm going to do to simplify this is put a square root over both sides. This will change this equation into x plus 13/4 and change this into the square root of 137 divided by 16. We can actually make this a little bit simpler. The square root of 137 divided by 16 is the same thing as the square root of 137 divided by the square root of 16. The square root of 137 doesn't simplify, so that's 137. And on the bottom, the square root of 16 is equal to 4. So that will just be 4. And since we have the squared value of this, we need to find the positive and negative version of this value. Because remember, when you have a parabola, your parabola isn't just on one side. It goes whoop whoop and actually hits on the negative side and the positive side. That's why we're adding this plus minus down here. I'm going to erase all this math so that way you have a little more room to work with, so just give me a second here. So this is the equation we just had before I erased everything. Now we just need to solve for x. We'll end up having two different answers. So what we're going to do is make two equations. X plus 13 divided by 4 is equal to the square root of 137 divided by 4. And the other equation, x plus 13 divided by 4 equals the negative of square root of 137 divided by 4. Remember, we had to find the plus and minus version of this in order to find both of the x roots. Solving this is pretty easy. For both of these equations, all we have to do is subtract 13/4. Let me just do that real quick for both of these equations. So after completing the square and solving for x, the roots of our parabola are equal to the square root of 137 divided by 4 minus 13 divided by 4 and negative square root of 137 divided by 4 minus 13 divided by 4. And this is our final answer and the zeros of our function. Wasn't that so much better than this pain over here? Well, anyways, if you guys found this tutorial helpful, consider subscribing for more fun math videos, and I will see you guys next time.